Next up, we'll hear from 4 of the biggest investors in the world. Between them, they've backed companies like Postmates, Nest, Thrive Global, The Honest Company, and ClassPass. So where do they think the funds will flow this year? Let's ask them. Please welcome to the stage, in conversation with Diane Brady, we have Trae Vassallo, co-founder and managing director of Defi, Jeff Clavier, founder and managing partner of Uncork Capital, Duggal, founding partner of Female Founders Fund, and Adam Valkin, partner at General Catalyst.
Hello, everybody. I'm Diane, and here come the Show Me the Money crowd here. Thanks. Which we got. So just, that's Trae, Jeff, Anu, and Adam. And I just want to start with a lightning round of what do you think's overhyped, underappreciated? Trae, I'm going to start with you since you're all alone there in the chair.
Since I'm on the end here. Let's say, well, I always love to say AI, MV, ML, pick a technology acronym that an entrepreneur is hyping, independent of actually solving a problem, and too much.
Jeff?
Overhyped, crypto, underhyped, a lot of the things that we invest in.
Okay. Anu?
Overhyped scooters, underhyped women's health.
Really? Well, I took an electric scooter here, so that's interesting to. And how about you, Adam?
I think you could argue, given the amount of capital that's available and the number of companies that are getting started, that almost everything is to some extent overhyped based on where we are in the cycle. And underhyped, I just think there are some areas where there's just so much opportunity that even if they're a little bit hyped, they're probably still relatively underhyped. For example, insurance, the future of insurance, the future of B2B payments, where I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Okay. So let's go straight into, I wanted you to talk a little bit about your investment thesis, just to share with people. And Trae, start with DeFi in terms of tell us a little bit about some of the companies in your portfolio right now and help us see around corners as to where you're putting your money.
Sure. Well, one thing about us is that both my partner and I have been investors for quite a long time. And so over the years, we've invested in everything from enterprise security to media. So we tend to take a pretty broad approach, ultimately looking for passionate entrepreneurs who are solving problems they understand really well. Let's say to highlight maybe a couple of companies in the portfolio, one area that we are very excited about is logistics. Basically, technology is going deep and transforming a lot of different industries, and while a lot of folks are fixated on that last mile of logistics, you can actually find corners of the logistics market that are very manual still, surprisingly. And so one of our companies, Airspace Technologies, is an incredible company that is sort of redefining how enterprises basically move product from point A to point B in a very kind of fast way. So if you need to get something between 2 cities in one day, they have an automated app that allows you to do that, and it's as easy as ordering an Uber.
Good. So Jeff, I noticed you're wearing the company shirt right now, Uncork Capital, because you were SubTech. Did that change at all, sort of how you're investing, or tell us a little bit about your own portfolios?
So after 13 years, we decided to rebrand because SubTech sort of hinted that we're doing software technology, and we had done a lot of hardware. I was the first investor in Fitbit. We were doing, a lot of frontier tech. So there was a bit of a misnomer. So like Trae, we just celebrated our 15-year anniversary, so we've been around for a while. So we do a lot of different things, whether it's a bit of consumer, a bit of marketplaces, a bit of hardware. We love SaaS, whether it's SaaS B2B enterprise. We think that every piece of software which has been developed in the last 50 years is being rewritten, SaaS fashion. So there's a massive opportunity there. The frontier tech kind of sector is really interesting to us. So it's the way I define that is technology where consumer or market adoption is definitely not around the corner, but the vision of the entrepreneurs and the potential is such that you're going to go for it and fund it and hopefully be something sort of large and bold.
Can you give us an example? What sort of frontier tech are you talking
Space
about?
tech would be sort of a good example. We have a company called Loft Orbital, which is essentially building AWS for space, democratizing access to space, which is a fascinating opportunity. one of the sectors which is underappreciated, I think, is developer tools, and we've done a number of those companies. LaunchDarkly is actually here at the conference, but we're fascinated by the fact that there's now millions of people sort of writing code, and they still sort of use tools which have been developed, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and so there's a lot of opportunities there.
Okay, so Anu, Female Founders Fund, a lot of people you talk to say we really want to invest in women. Can you give us some sense as to sort of, first of all, the advantages you think and how you frame the fund, and also where you're finding the most interesting investments right now?
Sure. So our belief is that the next billion-dollar businesses will be built by women, and there are some really interesting consumer insights that that they come to the table with that I think have been proven in terms of whether it's in the beauty space and the direct-to-consumer space. So that's our overall thesis. I think in terms of areas of interest for us, we've been tracking pretty closely the decline of the role that religion plays in people's lives. So, in 1960, almost 66% of Americans went to some type of religious institution. Fast forward to today, less than 30% of millennials do that. And so we have this belief that there's a real need for alternate communities. And a couple of examples in our portfolio where we've made an investment along this thesis include CoStar, which is an astrology app, The Wonder, which is a space, a members club for families, which enables young families to have a space that speaks to their children, also offers them the opportunity to socialize, and Peanut, which is a social network for modern moms that's both, that gives them the opportunity to connect online and offline.
Okay. Adam, not last but not least, where are you putting your money?
Yeah, so our firm, General Catalyst, has a pretty broad focus, ranging from enterprise software to consumer businesses and media. And we also invest very early stage all the way through to growth. What I've been focused on most recently is thinking about very large markets like banking, insurance, automotive, where the consumer experience is either broken or nowhere near where it needs to be, and working with entrepreneurs that are trying to reimagine what the future customer experience should be. Companies like Lemonade in insurance, Monzo in banking, Vroom in automotive, and then really trying to build the experience of the future. And on the flip side, investing in SaaS companies that are AI-driven, that are thinking about how to help the incumbents in those same spaces, in insurance, in financial services, in automotive, or other categories, compete in the new environment. And generally, it's using AI-driven software to do things faster, better, and much more cheaply. And an example of that is a company that we invested in France called Shift Technology, that uses AI to help large insurers detect fraudulent claims and automate claims, both of which have a huge impact on the profitability of the incumbent players. So you kind of bat on both sides with the disruptors and helping the incumbents, because the incumbents aren't going away.
Well, one of the challenges with especially early stage investing is that on a macro level, we sort of understand where the trends are, right? Like AI, machine learning, health tech, whatever, but it's, the devil's in the details, and it is a bit like Highlander, there can be only one or two or three. So I'd love to get some sense as to what triggers you to sort of think, aha, this is where I want to invest. Now, obviously, track record and some of the other things. Are there perhaps some other elements that might be helpful for entrepreneurs in the crowd to think about in terms of getting your attention? I'm going to start with you, Trae.
Yeah, sure. So, I always think it's funny when people think that spotting new trends is easy as going, oh, look at this new trend. And the reality is, when I invested in Nest in 2010, which largely everyone would say, oh, it's this great Internet of Things or smart home company. It was not an Internet of Things company. This was a company that was focusing on how to change energy efficiency profiles in homes, and ultimately found its niche in the Internet of Things. So trends, looking back retrospectively, often start out as something very different. I think the key is really finding people who are thought leaders and willing to really take a risk and take, in Nest's example, these were folks who had built transformative consumer products, and they were taking that knowledge and they were applying it in a new industry in a way that some people would argue is like, what are you doing? You're building a thermostat? And so sometimes it can be a little, risky, and so they're really taking a leap with kind of the markets they're going after. But that's what you need to do. You have to back these big teams, these great teams who bring some domain knowledge and the desire to try to change something big.
Mm-hmm. Jeff?
I think it's really about painting a vision of the future that may be sort of either an evolution or revolution from where we are today, and sort of working back and explaining how that team and that product that they're sort of thinking of developing can really sort of execute on that vision. And the most compelling entrepreneurs will be really good at that. They're really good sort of storytellers. And as VCs, we'll sort of look at, and especially for us at seed stage, like there's pretty much nothing that we can look at in terms of data. So it's really looking at the entrepreneur and what we refer to as the founder market fit. Do I see that founder executing in this specific market? And do we believe that they can actually sort of pull this off, knowing that it's so hard, it's going to take 10 years, they're going to almost die, 5 or 10 times. And then we see ourselves sort of working with them and helping them, and every now and then, typically 0.6% of the time, we get to invest.
Okay, Anu.
Sure. So just to add to what's already been said, what we really follow closely is consumer shifts and really how the culture is evolving over time. And so by that, we focus a lot, particularly on the millennial demographic. And I'll give you an example that's related to a company we just invested in. There's been a pretty marked decrease in the amount of alcohol consumption amongst the millennial demographic. And in New York,
except at this conference.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
And that's actually led to the phenomenon of sober bars in New York. And so one of our most recent investments is in a alternative to alcohol, which is called Kin Euphorics. And we invest a lot in consumer brands, and I think one of the things as an early indicator that's very important to us, again, at the seed stage, you have very little to really look at besides the founding team, is how is this brand engaging from a social perspective? So, on Instagram, are consumers passionate about this brand? Are they engaging? Are they commenting? Is the founder story authentic? Did she, in our case, start this company based on not just her own need, but really, is it a good fit for the type of business that she's focused on? So those are some of the things that we think about.
I like how the dramatic music started when you talked about alternatives to alcohol. So Adam, what about you?
I think a lot has been said that I agree with. I would just say our firm is very founder-driven, and we always trying to understand if the founders we are meeting are fast learners and have learned everything they possibly could have learned about the space they're in, either because they worked in it or because they went 24/7 to learn everything about it in a short space of time. And then looking for inevitable trends where it's really clear what the future will be. The question is, how long will it take and who's going to take us there? And can you get the timing right and find the right founder to take you to that future that you have some...
So I feel like we're going to have to sing loudly over this music, but one of the things that is interesting to me is the ecosystem. So here we are in Toronto. Like a lot of places, there's a sense that you're trying to build and accelerate the ecosystem for entrepreneurs, and we've been so focused on Silicon Valley, maybe Israel, but give me some sense as to sort of, does it make any difference to you whether there is an ecosystem in place for entrepreneurs in terms of where you're investing, and are there interesting spots that you find you're investing now other than Silicon Valley? I know you're based there, but tell us a little bit about some of that as well.
Yeah, so the geography question is obviously a really interesting one, especially as we see the rise of China, which is becoming the largest market out there. Now, we're a small firm, we've got 3 partners, and so part of this job is very hands-on and working closely with teams. And while Zoom is great, and we do a lot of Zooms, it still can't beat those in-person interactions. And so the hardest thing that we have to do is manage our time. So at our firm, we really do have a focus on West Coast. because that is where our networks are, that's where we can see and interact with these entrepreneurs. But the interesting thing that has been absolutely changing over the last few years is the amount of, just the distributed nature of the teams that these companies
cost
have.
of talent?
There's a whole bunch of reasons, partly because the collaboration tools have gotten so much better, so you actually can collaborate really well with teams of people in other locations. In Silicon Valley, a big driver is the fact that it has never been harder to hire an engineer into a firm in Silicon Valley. The churn is high, the amount that the Facebooks and Googles of the world can pay these engineers is extraordinary, and so there are a lot of motivations for that. So I get excited about, okay, what happens in 5 years now that you have all of these incredibly distributed engineering teams that have had some success? What are they going to do next? And so I think it's going to look a lot different.
Has anybody invested in Canada here? Okay, Jeff.
Yeah,
why? And thank you. No.
You're welcome. Well, so Trae sort of mentioned it. We grew up in a world where we used to drive to our investments. And then there's always like the one investment that is not in Silicon Valley, that happens to be in Canada, in Waterloo, and that was Vidyard for us. Mike Litt was here, and I just couldn't say no to that entrepreneur who was, super convincing with a charming Canadian accent. And we invested here, and we've done, 4 or 5 deals in Canada, and for us, it's sort of like when we invest in Silicon Valley or New York, it's like, we know where we go, we know who to work with. And I think the fundamental shift that Trae mentioned, which is this distribution of talent that we have to go for and accept now because of the stupid cost of scaling in San Francisco or New York or whatever, sort of forces us to look at innovation wherever it is. And for us, the test now is, can we see an ability for us to bring downstream investors, so people like Adam, to follow us to do a Series A or Series B in almost any of those geographies. And so yesterday on this stage, we had our company Turi, which is our first investment in Israel, mentioned that we just funded them. We led the round, and we're super excited. And so we've done investments in Israel. We've done a deal in Ireland. We've done a deal in Austin, Texas. And we're just excited about the kinds of innovation we can find. And we always partner locally with firms so that they can do the legwork of helping with recruiting and things like that. And we'll bring the Silicon Valley go-to-market knowledge, and hopefully that will give us an edge in the way we build companies.
Okay. So either in terms of geography or just how do you surface some of the hidden gems? I mean, and where are you finding them?
Sure. So in terms of geography, we're betting big on New York, and have been, from day one. I think, if you look at recent momentum, in the past 2 months, 3 female unicorns for the first time in history in New York have come about. So Glossier, Rent the Runway, and most recently Away. So, taking a step back, I think New York offers a lot in terms of industries. So whether it's financial services, real estate, retail, all these industries need disruption. And in addition to that, you are seeing more and more cases of engineers who want a different quality of life who are actually moving from the West Coast. So, we're excited to be in New York. Almost majority of our portfolio is based there, and we think that there's only going to be more and more stories of successful technology companies being built there.
I like the idea of a move to New York being a quality of life move. So that's very optimistic. Adam, how about you?
Yeah, so from an investing perspective, I focus on New York and the major European tech hubs like Tel Aviv, London, Paris, Berlin, and have been investing internationally for about 20 years.
You were based in Europe for a long time.
Yeah, I was based in Europe for 14 years. And I guess my insight is that the rise of the global platforms, which have had positive and negative impact, one big positive is that really helped facilitate the ability for large companies to be formed anywhere. And certainly in Europe, with the rise of Facebook and iOS and Android and AWS, it meant that entrepreneurs in relatively small groups, whether it was the Supercell guys in Finland or the Spotify guys in Stockholm or the Playtika guys in Israel, built multi-billion-dollar companies, not being in Silicon Valley or even being in the US, where in those industries like music and gaming, it would have been really difficult 15, 20 years ago to build a company that got that kind of scale. And certainly in Canada, you have a Shopify, that is a 30 billion-ish company that has emerged in the last 10 or 12 years, which is truly epic. And I think the benefits of having a company like that in this ecosystem will be felt for 20 or 50 years from now.
So before we get to our final thoughts, I'm curious to what extent, and any of you can answer this, I've had the political climate shifting the way you think about investing, and it could be the regulatory environment, it could be concerns about privacy, data, collection. Has that changed your investment thesis at all, or even, your interest in certain areas? You're nodding. Adam, what do you think?
I think the lack of immigration or anti-immigration sort of stance of the US government, which basically makes it harder for founders who have been trained in our schools in the US to stay, sort of forces us to think about how can we sort of go and fund them wherever they go because they can't stay in the US. Same thing, we used to import a lot of engineers from different countries and we can't do that anymore. It's become so much more sort of difficult. So thinking about building engineering centers outside of the US for US companies gives us access to that talent. Okay. So now we have a lot of companies, Front has half of his engineering team in Paris, mentioned Inscribe in Ireland. And so we just have to think about how to open sort of the funnel so we're not stuck in the US in a super competitive market.
So let's do the final thoughts, and I know you're now reduced to a quick poem or, invest, where are you putting your money? So I'm going to start with you, Trae. Some final thoughts you want people to take away.
Sure. Well, first of all, if you're raising an early Series A, come find us. And an area that we're particularly interested in is really how a lot of sort of version 1 platforms are getting re-envisioned. Whether it's LinkedIn getting kind of broken into verticals or how Facebook is going to evolve. A lot of this regulation actually feeds into opportunity for venture. So,
great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Jeff?
So to my fellow Canadian VC colleagues, if you are doing a seed round in Toronto or Waterloo and need a Silicon Valley cousin,
that's right.
Think of us.
Call me. So, okay, Anu.
And same, if you're a female founder or thinking about starting a company, feel free to reach out.
Okay, Adam, final thoughts. So you want people to reach out to you or leave you alone?
Oh, please reach out to us. So we have, General Catalyst has offices in Boston and New York, as well as San Francisco and Palo Alto. And please reach out to us anytime. Valkin@generalcatalyst.com.
Great.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking everybody, and be sure to harass them during the conference. So thanks very much.